everyone to the Monday, August 24th meeting of the Marion City Council. I have a Boy Scout out of uniform out in the audience, but we call upon all the Boy Scouts who come to lead us in the pledge. So, young man, come forward. You may be in stealth, but it doesn't work. Come forward and lead us in the pledge. We'd all stand and face the flag. We have our sources.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you'll come to the microphone and introduce yourself and tell us why you're here. That's the microphone.
My name is Kyle Bratcher. I'm a Life Scout from Troop 985, and I'm here for my Communications Merit Badge.
Well, Kyle, welcome to the city of Roswell. We have two Life Scouts up here, Councilman Orleans and Councilman DiPolito. And if you have the backing of your parents, as I did, maybe you'll become an Eagle too.
Hopefully, sir.
So welcome to the city council.
Thank you very much.
This time I'll call upon Councilman Orleans to say nice things about our police department.
Well, actually, if I was going to do that, I'd probably be here for the next 3 days. But to fill in, we're going to call the chief up to talk about our accreditation.
Thank you. In 1995, the Roswell Police Department was accredited for the very first time. In July of this year, the Roswell Police Department was accredited for the 7th time by the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, or CALEA. Less than 5% of the law enforcement agencies across the country are accredited by CALEA. So we're very, very, very proud of the accomplishment of not only being accredited by CALEA, but being accredited for 7 years since for 7 times since 1995. I've been in law enforcement for over 35 years, and I've worked for a county sheriff's office. I've worked for the GBI, and now I've worked for the Roswell Police Department for almost 3 years now. And what I can tell you from my travels across the state with the GBI, where I work with many law enforcement agencies, is there's not a more professional agency in the state or in the Southeast than the Roswell Police Department. I'm very excited that we've met this accomplishment, and you just have an outstanding police department. I know you're as proud of them as I am.
We have other policemen here. Any of them you wish to recognize?
Unfortunately, our two main individuals who assisted us in CALEA, Amber Grizzle, who's our accreditation manager, was called to be with her mother, and she's not able to be with us tonight, and Captain Duncan also was unable to be with us tonight. So they are the two driving forces behind the CALEA accreditation and the process. But during this last accreditation, we actually went through what was referred to as the gold standard for an assessment. And as part of that, the assessors not only review the files, which is typically what they do, but they actually go out and meet with the individual officers. They ride with every shift that we have. They attended our roll call briefings, and they interacted with the officers unlike they ever have. And because of that, the police department, in my opinion, really has a new perspective of what CALEA was. Before, it was always something that the accreditation manager handled, and they never really were part of the process. But because of this gold standard, they were part of the process.
Chief, I just want to say I was here for the very first accreditation, of course, and I know it was very exciting back then, and they were very pumped up about getting it, which is great. But this being now the 7th time, I think that's just a great testament to the department and all they do, keeping the department on the top of forces across the state and the country. So I want to thank you and all of our staff in the police department for maintaining this accreditation.
Well, thank you. And many times I'm approached by citizens and you as well, who thank me and commend me for the job that I do at the police department. And my answer is always the same, and it's a very, very, very sincere, and it's that the men and women of the Roswell Police Department make me look good every day, and I appreciate them because it's their efforts, not mine, that make the Roswell Police Department what it is.
I see several members of our police department out here. Could I have all our policemen stand up? Let's have a hand to the Roswell Police Department. Thank you, gentlemen. council? Do you have something to present to the council?
This is just the,
I think the council wants a photo op with all these gentlemen. Gentlemen, if you'll come forward, and ladies,
right, this
and you
is
can present
the,
this with a photo op.
correct. Also, at the conclusion, we have our fourth canine is here tonight. It wasn't something that we planned, but he's here. So Robbie is here. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I'm nominating Chris Fink for the Design Review Board. Do we have a motion to approve the nomination? Motion to approve by Councilmember Nguyen. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Orlins. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. This time we'll call upon liaison.
Consent agenda.
We've got the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move for approval.
Motion by Councilman Orland, second by Councilmember Nguyen. Does anyone in the audience have any questions regarding the consent agenda? Best to stay quiet at this point. All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. Thanks for coming, gentlemen. Your support did it. Your convincing presentation did it. So now we're on to admin liaison, Kent Eigelhart. Ken, if you'll call the calendar on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Believe it or not, October is coming up quickly, so our first item is the approval of a resolution to allow scarecrows in the city of Roswell right-of-way. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Councilmember Eichelhart. This is actually in the form of a resolution for the scarecrows in the right-of-way. This is for the 2015 Booyah Scarecrow event. It's scarecrows that will be designed and put out on the right-of-way of the city. The requirement is that there must be some type of identification tag placed on the scarecrow, no larger than 8.5 by 11. On that identification tag will be the creator's name of that item and the entrance name of who it is that is actually entering the scarecrow. They will be put out in September 28th through November 1st, and we're asking for approval of the resolution to be able to allow the scarecrows for the Booyah Scarecrow event.
Do we have a motion?
Question.
Question. Councilmember Nguyen.
I just see it non-political, you know, I think it was 2 years ago, we allowed scarecrows to have that, so that's not gonna be allowed on these scarecrows then. It's just created by.
Strictly who was created by and who the entrant is of that particular
So it could be
item.
created by a candidate. He just can't say, vote for me.
He can't say vote for me,
Okay,
correct.
that's, I just want that clarification.
But the candidate could put created by Councilman Orlins.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to clarify, is that all we're doing here is passing a resolution to put a sign on them. It has nothing to do with regulating the scarecrows. The city's not regulating Some of us read the other part that is strictly for the competition with the CVB, which has nothing to do. So,
You can put the
You can still
scarecrow
put a
in the
scarecrow
right-of-way,
out.
but not the sign.
and not go in, no, you put the scarecrow out with a sign, but not submit it for the competition to CVB.
Correct. The resolution is to allow them to put it on our right-of-way and to have the sign on the
Right.
scarecrow.
That's all we're doing as a city.
That's all we're doing.
Has nothing to do with the CVB and their competition.
Correct.
Correct. Thank you.
But again, it says created by and the name of the entrant.
Correct.
And now it can only be 8.5 by 11. I want to make sure, can a political sign that's 8.5 by 11 be put on the scarecrow if it is not part of the CVB contest?
I would let David Davidson answer that question.
That's, the city is not regulating that, the CVB is regulating that. You are allowing this for the special event that's being put on by the CVB, so you're allowing the scarecrows from their event to be in the right-of-way. So
Okay.
their rules say that it can't be political, but that's not what you're voting on tonight.
We're just saying that they can do that. Okay, gotcha.
So with all that, I'll make a motion for approval.
Motion for approval by Councilmember Eichelhardt. Second by Councilmember Diamond. Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Next item is approval for signing a contract with UME Gerber Life for health insurance stop-loss coverage with a projected annual premium cost of $493,214.40 for the period of October 1, 2015 through September 30th, 2016. Mr. Hunter.
Yes, good evening. This item is for your consideration for approval for the city to enter into a contract for reinsurance stop-loss coverage with UME Gerber Life. Currently, Blue Cross Blue Shield handles both the administrative services and the reinsurance coverage for our healthcare benefits. The reinsurance coverage is up for renewal. When those renewal rates came in, it's always a little bit of sticker shock with healthcare these days with renewals. So our benefits broker, consultant, the Benefits Planning Group, represented this evening by David Pittard, appreciate David being here, did a RFP to 12 different carriers. And when those came back, UME Gerber Life was the most competitive. And this will enable us to come in under budget with expected claims, and so that's the item before you.
Do we have any questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Mr. Harner, so this is replacing the Blue Cross Blue Shield program that's in place now, or is this a different?
No, yes, sir, this just replaces the stop-loss reinsurance portion of that. Blue Cross Blue Shield will continue to be the administrative, provide administrative services.
So for purposes of medical needs for our employees, they would still be under the Blue Cross Blue Shield, I guess it's Anthem.
Yes, that's correct. Still have the card, they would still process claims, et cetera. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have a motion? Motion for approval by Councilmember Eichelhardt. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Orleans. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? All in, Councilmember Orleans?
I was just going to say, Jason, did you only go to 12 carriers? What's the problem? No, I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing.
All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. This time, we'll call upon liaison to recreation. Well, we don't have a liaison at the moment. I'm going to call upon Kay Love to call the Recreation Parks Department calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First item is approval of an amendment to the City of Roswell Code of Ordinances, Article 14.24K, Activities Prohibited in Parks and Public Places, Smoking. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Ms. Love. This amendment would add e-cigarettes, vape pens, and other similar devices to the list of smoking products that are prohibited in the City of Roswell parks. The Roswell Recreation Commission took this issue up several months ago and has done research in this particular area, and they came up with three basic reasons that they think that this should be added to the list of prohibited activities. One is an enforcement issue that You can't tell from a distance whether somebody is using an e-cigarette, a vape, or is smoking. So it becomes an issue for staff and for park police to enforce the no smoking issue. It's also a perception issue that young children in the park can see someone using these particular devices and doesn't know whether they're smoking or not smoking. So it could be perceived that smoking is once again allowed in the park. And the other is a health issue, is that these particular items have not been studied to any great degree by the FDA or the CDC. So there are certainly some issues there. Be glad to, the commission brought this forth as an issue, and that's where we're here tonight. Be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Wynn.
Mr. Rogers, I see here that on K that was changed, you have nicotine product is also listed, so I'm assuming that means Nicorette gum or anything that contains nicotine. So that would also be Nicorette gum, Nicorette whatever that people chew to help quell their cravings for nicotine. That's a nicotine product.
Mr. Davidson, do you have an opinion on that?
As it's worded, that would be included.
So now we're going to go around to everybody who's chewing gum and tell them to spit it out?
Well, that was certainly not the intent.
So, Mr.
of this
Davidson,
moving
if
forward.
the council wished to amend it to limit it to e-cigarettes and smoking tobacco products,
They could simply take out the phrase nicotine product.
Ms. Wynn, if you wish, you can suggest an amendment. Any other questions? Do we have a motion? Councilmember Eichelhardt.
I'll move to approve with the striking of the words nicotine product from K.
Oh, Mr. Davidson needs to read it first. I apologize.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend Chapter 14, Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell regarding smoking. Now therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following amendment. Chapter 14, Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell, Georgia, Article 14.2, Regulation of Use of Public Parks, Section 14.2.4, Activities Prohibited in Parks and Public Places. Subsection K is hereby amended by deleting subsection K and substituting a new subsection K to read as follows, text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this would be the first reading.
Mr. Eichelhardt, do you wish to repeat your motion?
Now I will move for approval, but with striking the words nicotine product from K.
Motion by Councilman Eichelhardt with a revision. Councilman Orland.
Second.
There's a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise. Yes. Yes.
I was hoping to get an opportunity to speak.
Please come
on this
forward.
subject.
If you'll identify yourself and give your address.
I sure will. I'm Bill Funderburk. I'm president of Georgia Smoke-Free Association, and I'm at 3212 Westside Country Drive in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia. I came down tonight at the behest of a couple of local vendors in the area. We are a nonprofit educational foundation, and we have done a lot of research, and we continue to monitor all the latest research. And I understand the concern of the council, and I thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity to speak. And I understand some of the current concerns that the gentleman before me had with, the problem with distinguishing the products. Would have some differences of opinion as far as, the health and the studies been done. There have been a lot of studies done. I would urge you not to amend your local ordinance, and the primary reasons are threefold. One is the health issue. There's been numerous studies, and I've got information I'll be glad to pass out to everyone here, but there have been numerous studies that show that the secondhand vapor is basically inert. There's no risk from it at all. Those studies were done in enclosed laboratory rooms, not outside in a public park. So there would be even less risk there, obviously. The other issue that you're going to run into, there's none of the litter associated with the electronic cigarettes like you do with cigarettes. You're not going to find the wrappers on the ground, the cigarette butts, that kind of thing. The third issue that you're going to run into, again, just like the Nicorette gum, is going to go to the enforceability issue. There is a HB 251 in the state of Georgia which defines vapor products as distinct from smoking products. So the definition, if you look in HB 251, your electronic cigarettes, your vape pens, your mods, your e-juices, your e-liquids, all the other new words that's come into play as these products have grown, all refer to them having nicotine. So you'd run into an enforcement issue because the way the ordinance is drafted now with e-cig, if you go by the state law definitions, somebody vaping something that doesn't have nicotine in it, which a lot of smokers, once they've weaned themselves off of the nicotine, they actually have no nicotine in what they're using. So technically, that's not even vaping by the state. And so you would run into enforceability issues there. I would be glad to hand out all this information. One thing that I thought was interesting, he mentioned the CDC. You can go look it up for yourself, but Tom Frieden's the doctor that's in charge of the CDC. Granted, he does not like smoking. He's a big anti-smoking advocate. He doesn't like vaping for certain other reasons, but even he is on record as saying they're exponentially safer than a regular cigarette. You can also look, I've got studies to support it, but Michael Siegel with the Boston University School of Public Health says anything we do that deters people from having this option is horrible. This is the best tool in the fight against cigarettes in our generation, in our lifetimes. There have been numerous studies. One was at Drexel University fairly recently, and then the other one, let me look, gotta put my glasses on here. The other one was at the Roswell Park Cancer Institute in Buffalo, New York. So I thought it was kind of ironic that it was at Roswell. Studied secondhand vapor, and there's no risk. The Roswell study actually did 9,000 observations, 9,000 tests. And both of these recent research were done in 2014, 2015. So you don't have the risk with the secondhand vapor. You're going to have enforceability issues. And the other nice thing about allowing the vapor products to continue is that smoker, when they see that, maybe that will get them on something else that's better than smoking for their health. You know, so for all those reasons, you know, I would ask that you not pass that amendment. You know, and like I said, I'm here to answer questions, and if it please your honor and your honorable council members, I'd like to hand out just some information.
If you'll give the information to Kay Love, our city administrator.
I got one for everybody.
And you can just hand it all to her and she'll pass it out. Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Diamond.
Mr. Thunderberg, thank you. The studies that you mentioned, are they long-term studies?
Well, the studies on secondhand vapor, they can't be long-term. They're just studying, what's released, you know, basically in a enclosed box, an enclosed room. One of the studies, what they did was had folks go in and smoke cigarettes, and then they would test the air, you know, and run the test basically on the tobacco smoke. Then they would take that same room, they would clean it out, ventilate it, and so then they would have people use electronic cigarettes in the same room. And then when they tested that, there was negligible anything, statistically insignificant. And given the fact that they smoked in the room before they did the actual vaping, you know, you would think there might even be some left over from the cigarettes. Obviously, I wasn't there when they did the studies, and they probably did a terrific job of scrubbing, cleaning, and, you know, ventilating it so there wouldn't be any cross-contamination. But they actually did the smoking test and then the electronic cigarette test.
So,
as far as the secondhand.
Again, you have no way to know the effect on the human body of any of that for any length of time.
Well, what we know is there's nothing in the secondhand vapor that would cause any kind of health risk no matter how long. Now, as far as people using it, I think that's kind of where you're going with that. You know, people that are using it, there have been long-term studies both in Denmark, 3 places, Denmark, Germany, and Poland have had some long-term studies. And all the evidence as it's coming in, you know, because it is a newer product. Most of what's on the market now has only been around, you know, since, you know, 2005 or so. And it's, you know, the products have continually improved. You know, so there's not really any long-term studies as far as, you know, users, what's going to happen to them. But everything that comes in is more encouraging day by day. And what we do know is it's exponentially, I mean, even according to Tom Frieden, who's an opponent of ours, that they're way safer than standard cigarettes, that they're way safer than combustible smoke and all of its 4,000 some odd chemicals.
And it may be a moot point, because I do think that a lot of this is the message we're sending in the park. You know, we're not talking about your right to be on the street, we're talking about what we're trying to do in the park. But I wonder, to your comment about the different kinds, if taking out the nicotine product eliminates that discussion, because it's really more the look of it than it is what they're actually using.
I understand. Well, under HB 251, which is a law, this law in Georgia, it's also the one that establishes you have to be 18 to purchase those products. But under that law, the e-cigs, e-pens, e-liquids are all defined as containing solutions of nicotine. So if you have a zero nicotine solution, then you're in a quandary. What do you call that device in your ordinance? Because if you call it an e-cig, well, if you go back over to HB 251, well, an e-cig is a device that's used to vape a nicotine solution.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Wynn.
And I don't think so much questions as comments. I think it's, my brother-in-law, I'm just going to use an example, quit 2 years ago in November, and he used the e-cigarette to quit. And I think for the last 8 or 9 months, he hasn't even had nicotine in his e-cigarette. It is cinnamon flavored or nutmeg or something. It's just to keep his hands busy. And I'm a smoker. I quit 23 years ago, and it's not the easiest thing to do. I think e-cigarettes is really a godsend to some people who want to quit, but they don't know what to do with their hands. At least they still have that there. I'm not really for this ordinance, and I understand the enforcement issue that some people might think that it is a cigarette, but if you see somebody with an e-cigarette, that vapor is gone like in 2 seconds. It's not like a continual spiral of smoke and the flame and the ashes and the smell also. I'm not really, I voted to ban tobacco products in this park, mainly cigarettes or pipes or cigars or whatever, because of the secondhand smoke. But this, I understand what Councilmember Diamond's saying about the long-term studies, but if you look at anything long-term, eggs were good for you, then they weren't good for you, then they were good for you again, and red wine's the same thing, or anything else that you can look at. You know, one day it might be good for you, the next day it's going to kill you, in 3 days if you keep doing it. So I'm just not real convinced that the vapors from these e-cigarettes or vape products or whatever is really that harmful to the people surrounding that person that's using them. And so I'm really not in favor of this, and I just can't vote for it.
Well, as Councilmember Wynn just mentioned, cigarettes, when they sit there and they continue to burn, whether you're puffing on or not, that's referred to in the medical literature as the side stream of smoke, and that is known to be very carcinogenic, and it is a lot of risk with secondhand smoke. We don't have that with vapor. Like I said, in the studies, it's just not in. And the other thing in the studies that's mentioned in some reports, and love for you to go look at those studies yourself, is it does dissipate very, very, very quickly, which is another thing Councilmember Wynn just brought up.
Councilmember Orleans.
I appreciate you bringing the information to us. We've got some information as well from the FDA, from the HHS website, from CDC website, from cancer.net, from Science News, from RTI International. And so they all have different opinions on this and different studies that have been done. And I guess it comes down, one point is several studies show that e-cigarettes are getting teens addicted to the drug nicotine, in some part due to the teens' belief that they are safer and without long-term effects of cigarettes, but the end result is the same, any type of addiction. So yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of different information, different opinions. And as was said by Councilmember Diamond, we're not dealing with the sale of the products, we're not dealing with them on the street. All we're doing is saying is that we prefer not to have the products in our parks as an example for our children. Our parks are set up for our kids and our families, and we are just trying to set an example as any other type of example you might do as a parent for your children, along with all the data and the studies that are going different directions, talking about potential carcinogens and all these other things. But I appreciate the information you brought, and we'll definitely take a look at it as well.
All right. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak again tonight. And I did want to say that I appreciate what you did for the local bike community. That was awesome. I'm a cyclist also, so thank you for your time.
Councilmember Eichelhardt.
Mr. Orland said most of what I was going to say, but I do appreciate this information. I will look at it further because, as you say, there's a lot on both sides. But I did want to ask, between now and the second reading, that Mr. Davidson look at this HB 251 and help us understand what the issues are there, because I'm not fully understanding, or I understand, but I want you to give us the legal side. Thanks.
Any other comments? Councilmember Napolito.
One final comment on all that. I agree with a lot of what's been said. And I think the point of when someone is vaping, we run into the issue of not knowing if there may be no nicotine in there, there may be nothing. The converse is also true. So, how do we guard our children against the potential impacts that maybe somebody isn't using this properly, and there is no way to know, and that's part of the problem. So I support this ordinance.
Any further discussion? Anyone else wish to comment? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. That is Orleans, Eichelhardt, Dippolito, Diamond in favor of the first reading with the revision proposed by Mr. Eichelhardt. All opposed. That's Councilmember Wynn. First reading passes 4-1.
Next item is approval to amend Chapter 8, Health and Public Safety of the City of Roswell Code of Ordinances by adding Article 8.10, Park Police Agency. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Ms. Love. This particular amendment will add a Park Police Agency as a standalone agency. Currently, the Park Police are a division of the Court Services Division in the Administrative Department. This particular change will eliminate on paper our Park Police officers being supervised by someone else other than in our department. So it's an administrative change. Nothing functionally or operationally will change. It's just a housekeeping tool to get the standalone agency where it will report directly to the Recreation Parks Department. I'll answer any questions you may have.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Dippolito.
Thank you. I have no concerns over the intent of the ordinance, which is to shift the reporting, and I'm fine with that. But now that we have opened this ordinance and are talking about it, I actually have a question about the patrol powers. And having looked at that, it seems very broad to me that the authority is over the entire city. And I guess I would like the police chief to weigh in and see if he has any concerns over that. It would seem to me that if a police officer has jurisdiction essentially citywide, then that is a police officer that ought to report to the police department. Now, the way this is written, it says that they have authority to patrol over any area of the city, but shall focus on park areas within the city. I guess my thought on that is maybe it ought to read the opposite of that, where they have authority to patrol over the parks, but in emergency situations they can go elsewhere in the city or something to that extent. Chief, do you have any concerns about that?
Just a legal concern, and my legal concern would be if I was a sharp lawyer and I was arrested by a park police who saw me racing through a neighborhood, I'd say, what's the emergency? And then you'd have a whole nother level of defense. So I believe that when an officer sees a violation in the city of Roswell that is a flagrant violation, whether he's a park police or a city of Roswell police, he should have the discretion to issue a citation. But if you condition it by saying, gotta be an emergency, that's a whole nother legal defense.
Well, and I was just suggesting that, Mike, I think you understand what my concern is, that we're now creating a whole different designation of police that have jurisdiction over the entire city. So I was actually asking the chief what his thoughts were on that, and if the chief is okay with that, then I guess I'll get comfortable with it.
Yeah, I really don't have any concerns. My thought is, and a good analogy would be the university police departments. Many times their jurisdiction ends 500 feet from the campus property. And at times when they're called upon, when there's an emergency to respond, to assist other officers, it's not as clear what their authority is. And I think within the city, with the park police having the citywide jurisdiction, makes that legally cleaner.
Okay, and you're comfortable that the way this is written, that having the park police report to the Recreation Parks Department works?
It does, yes.
And they're also getting trained by your department, I understand.
Correct, and now I'll be honest, there are some efficiencies if they were part of our department that I recognize, but also I recognize that by them being part of Rec and Parks, there are some efficiencies there, and that would be my recommendation, that they remain part of Parks and Rec and Parks.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Davidson, Councilmember Orleans, was that a question?
I was just going to move for approval.
Mr. Davidson needs to read the ordinance.
Thank you. An ordinance to amend Chapter 8, Health and Public Safety, Article 8.10, Police Protection of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell. Chapter 8, now therefore the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following amendment. Chapter 8, Health and Public Safety, Article 8.10, Police Protection of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell, Georgia, is hereby amended by adding thereto a new Article 8.10 to read as follows. Article 8.10, Park Police Agency, text of which is included herein by reference, and if approved, this will be the first reading.
Do we have a motion? Councilmember Orleans.
Move for approval.
Motion by Councilmember Orleans for approval of the first reading. Is there a second? Councilmember Eichelhart seconds that motion. Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Next item is approval of an adapted sports field project at Waller Park Extension. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Ms. Love. The Roswell Rotary Club, the Roswell Recreation Association, the Friends of the Roswell Park, and a private citizen have partnered to bring an adaptive sports field to Waller Park Extension. An adaptive sports field is a barrier-free, handicap accessible field with a synthetic surface that accommodates wheelchairs, walkers, and helping to prevent injuries. Such fields enables children and adults with disabilities the opportunity to play sports on a level playing field. Multiple sports can be played on this type of surface. Again, I just emphasize that this particular project is being funded 100% by private donations, and we're just excited about it coming to Roswell.
And we are excited. Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Orleans.
Roger, I just wanted to clarify. I was reading on your list of donations, you have Friends of Roswell at $15,500, and then I was reading their letter, and their letter said $41,500 as their donation. So I was just trying to get clarification on that.
Well, the reason they wrote it like that is because if there's they're basically allocating some extra money for some equipment and things like that once the program is developed. So they have some money for program development as well. So they just included how much they have right now designated for that.
Oh, okay, so the 15.5 is what's going for the actual building.
That's what we needed to get the project total of $126,000.
Okay, and this is great. We've been talking about trying to do something like this for years, so it's good that it's finally happening, and we've got all these different organizations that are coming together for donating the money. So thank you very much. It's great.
Any other questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Rogers, I think this is great, and applaud the efforts to make this happen. The field looks like it's funded. Do we have any need to include handicap ramps to get to the field, handicap parking, any of those issues, or are those all being taken care of as part of this
It's all as part of the accessibility to the field itself is part of the project, and the park from the parking is accessible from the parking already. So that part of the park that will be used is already accessible. So that's included in the project. One of the things that is also good to know is that the playground there at Waller Park Extension is an accessible playground already. So that's a playground where a child in either a walker or a wheelchair can get up on the playground equipment and actually use the equipment. So it makes sense for this field to go in at that park. So it's going to be a nice win-win for everybody.
Specifically, which field is this at
It's,
Wallen Park?
if you turn up Dobbs and going toward Waller Park Extension, when you get to the big parking lot where the fields are, it's the first field right there on the right. What we call it's the smaller field at Waller Park Extension, but it's the first one you come to.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion? Motion for approval by Councilmember Orleans. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Yes, sir, come forward. You'll give us your name and address, please. For the record.
Mayor Wood, City Council, Lee Fleck, Martin's Landing. I have one question whenever I see the word synthetic fields. Is there going to be any infill used on these fields?
Yeah.
What is that infill going to be?
The same that we have on the other fields.
Very well. You're talking to crumb rubber. Okay, I want to put in on the record, which many of you councilmen have already seen, which I've sent to you, and I'm going to read the most recent study done by Yale University about, and the title is Many Carcinogens Found in a Yale Analysis of Crumb Rubber Infill. North Haven, Connecticut, June 11, 2015, a couple months ago. Environmental and Human Health, Inc., an organization of physicians and public health professionals, is releasing its study done by Yale University showing the analysis found 96 chemicals in the rubber tire infill used on synthetic turf and rubber surfacing in toddler playgrounds. Of the 96 chemicals detected, 20% are probable carcinogens. Another 40% of the chemicals are in the group that are found to be irritants. 24% are respiratory irritants, some causing asthma symptoms. 38% are skin irritants, and 27% cause eye irritants. I'm not going to elaborate into the doctor's analysis. I'm going to move to the final study analysis. This study should give pause to all those schools, towns, and government agencies that have told the public these fields are safe. As Nancy Alderman, president of the Environmental and Human Health, Inc., exposing toddlers, students, and athletes to this many chemicals, many at the same time, seems like an incredibly irresponsible experiment in human health and needs to come to an abrupt end. I strongly suggest that you stop using the crumb rubber tires, which I have provided you analysis from 2009, 2010, 2013, all indicating that there is a problem, okay? The Environmental Protection Agency has rescinded its approval of the use of this crumb rubber in children's fields. There are multiple alternatives, okay? And I want to emphasize that you consider using the alternatives. Some of them are simple things like quate, which is the skin off a coconut, which is mixed with clay and worked in the fields, and has the same effect as this crumb rubber. They also use white latex rubber from sneakers that are reprocessed. There are also industrial little white balls they use that are latex also, and not tire, chewed up tire, which is just inundated with multiple chemicals that are irritants. Now you're taking children who have handicaps already, and now you're going to expose them to environmentally terrific, dangerous chemicals within the crumb rubber. I have provided you with sufficient evidence so far over the last year that it should be a no-brainer that you ask them to consider using an alternative to the black tire, chewed-up tire that you're using in all your other fields. I want you also to know that I'm proactive in handing out propaganda and analysis like this at all the fields in Roswell that utilize this thing to bring this to the attention of the public. Thank you very much.
Does anyone else wish to comment? Mr. Rogers, has the Rec Commission considered the safety of the materials used on this athletic field proposed?
Here's your copy.
They have, Mayor, and the commission has looked at a lot of the studies and all the information, not all the information, the information they have says that it is not unsafe for the kids and the citizens to be on those fields.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Does the council have any questions? Do we have a motion? Oh, we already had a motion. We've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. I think we're to the point of the last thing on the agenda is a recommendation for closure to discuss personnel, litigation, and real estate. Do we have a motion for closure? Motion by Councilmember DePolito. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Diamond. All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. We're adjourned. Good meeting.